He was a morbidly obese surgeon destined for an operating table and an early death. Now he's a rebel MD who is fabulously fit and fighting to make America healthy again. This is Stay Off My Operating Table with Dr. Philip Ovadia.
Welcome back, folks. It is the Stay Off My Operating Table podcast. You're listening to this after the first of the year, but we're recording this right after Thanksgiving. I have recovered, but that's because I was relatively well behaved. What about you guys?
Pretty well behaved as well, I'll say. So, and I'm going to go out on a limb and be confident in saying I'll be well behaved during the upcoming holidays as well. Holiday brisket has been my savior.
I'm doing that next year, yes.
I had a couple of little setbacks, but I've recovered. Nothing like what happened last year around Thanksgiving, where I put on 15 pounds between Thanksgiving and New Year's. I'm being more careful this year.
The voice you just heard is Chris Cornell, who's been on the show before. I'm glad, Phil, that you invited him back. So I'm just going to turn it over to you guys. Take it away. What are we talking about today?
Yeah, this is exciting to announce that Chris has formally joined the Ovadia Heart Health team and is our newest health coach over in our private practice. And that's sort of the context for bringing him back. But in the meantime, it's been a couple of years since we had him on the show, and lots of, I think, updates from Chris as to what he's been up to, which we want to hear about. And, Chris, I think last time we had you on, we kind of went into your background some, but I think it is useful to talk about it again, because it is really a great story as to what brought you to metabolic health and what improvements you've made over your health over the last few years. And then we can talk about some of the amazing things that you've been up to.
Yeah, I really enjoyed being on with you both a couple of years ago. And I do remember telling my story. The short version is that when I was 51 years old, I stepped on a scale at my mother's house, saw the numbers 278 looking up at me, and really shook me up a little bit. I had no idea that I had let myself go that far. And I guess I was in a bit of a state of denial. But, it was in 2018 that I reached out to a doctor friend, sort of out of desperation, because I could see the calorie restriction that I had been trying to use to lose weight for years was working a little bit, and yet I was on the verge of being unable to sustain the willpower once again. So I reached out to a doctor friend, and he recommended Gary Taubes's Why We Get Fat. It turned out to be as simple for me as reading the book, got to some passages that really made sense to me, and I pretty much started my low-carb diet that weekend. And it probably is one of the real turning points of my life, because I lost 80 pounds and I've sustained that fat loss for 6 years. And the loss of that weight sort of got me thinking that if I was unable to do something for basically 3 or 4 decades that I was trying to do that was important to me, and then I found a way to do it, I started wondering, how many other things are there in my life that are similar, in that, maybe I've been limiting myself or accepting something far less than what was possible. And so that's the way I look at life now. And I think that's what sort of inspired me to become a health coach. And yeah, I'm really enthusiastic to talk about the health coaching and, some of the things that have really led me to get to this point.
Yeah, and it is inspiring seeing, as you have been kind of exploring and pushing your limits with various physical pursuits. But before we get to that, one thing I think I do really want to mention, and I think that is so important about your story, is you had cancer come in along the way, and maybe talk a little bit about that, the effects it sort of had, and how that kind of intertwined with this overall metabolic health improvement.
Yeah, the cancer was also a really big part of my life and has changed the way I look at life substantially. It was a really strange confluence of events, or, I lost 80 pounds of weight. And during that time, I started exercising more. And by August of 2018, I was weighing 80 pounds less. You could start to see the muscle coming through my arms and my chest. And I went to my doctor's visit in the end of August of that year. And I was waiting for her to tell me what a great patient I was, and how amazing it was that someone had actually lost 80 pounds. And the first thing I heard her say was, "What's that lump on your neck?" And I was aware of it, and that was definitely part of, or her question was, "How long have you had it?" I guess I pointed it out to her, and I could see by the expression on her face that I probably should have gotten into the doctor's office sooner than I had. And by October, I had surgery on my neck to remove the lymph node. And then few days later, I got word that there was cancer, had to go down for more surgery and chest biopsy, and, some really scary times, because I got to the point where they saw my chest light up. And, there was one doctor, the head and neck surgeon, basically told my wife and I that if what he saw in my chest was cancer, that there would be no treatment for it, like, I guess, palliative or whatever. But if that was metastasized cancer, that was it. And, I remember leaving that office, and my wife and I didn't say a word for, from the time we were in front of the doctor, probably till 20 minutes later, driving down the road. Finally I got the courage up to say something, but it was just hard to even fathom. So I had the cancer, and that was like right after the good news of losing the weight. So I sort of had to postpone the celebration for, I guess it turned out to be like 6 months of, between the waiting to get the start on the radiation and chemo and going through those treatments. It wasn't until about March of the following year that I was told that they did not see any more cancer, that I was, in cancer-free, in quotes. And then I'm now at the point where 5 years later, they really have me on the cancer-free list, and I just go back once, I think it's once a year now, for checkups. But I went from really thinking my days were potentially severely numbered, and I told myself back then that I would never take another day for granted. So that's where I am. And then 5 years later, that's something that I've stuck to. I look at every day as a blessing, and I treat my opportunity to do things like go for a run with my wife or my daughter, go on a trip or a hike, even some things that I used to regard as, oh, that's, I'll just stay home and sit on the couch and watch a football game or something. And now I really savor life. I enjoy all the things that life provides. And part of my mission is to make myself as healthy and as fit as I can be, because I want to be around for as long as I can. And more importantly, I want to be able to enjoy every year that I'm here, because, I know what it was like to be 200 and almost 80 pounds. And that type of life is not as enjoyable by any means. It's limiting, it's restrictive. It's not, I don't judge anyone else, but if you have the opportunity to make life significantly better and you waste that, you don't get another chance.
Do you think your experience, with cancer would have been different had you not, started that metabolic health improvement and lost that weight?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm the furthest thing from a cancer expert. My wife, who works at a hospital, she's not a doctor or a nurse. She's a director of communications at a children's hospital, but she is incredible with the Google, and she knows a lot more about how to help a 50-something-year-old guy, I'm 60 now, navigate the medical complex and get the best treatment. And she was really with me every step of the way. I definitely think, because between the work my wife did doing those searches and finding every imaginable person that had similar types of cancer to me, I've seen the experiences other people had, and some of them just getting through the chemo and the radiation, it was pretty nasty. The radiation to my neck, it caused intense pain. It prevented me from eating for large, extended periods of time. It made things miserable, but I was still going to the gym, as many days as I could during that treatment. And I was still shedding muscle way faster than I could imagine, but I was doing everything I could to keep myself fit. And I know I got through the treatment. Some of the things that I was able to do, a lot of other people going through the exact same treatment, struggled a lot more with. I talked to a lot of people who were doing it, and I've read so many cases. So I think that the being on a very low sugar diet, very low carb diet, it definitely helped a lot. And my fitness levels, I mean, considering how much muscle I lost during the treatment, I think that somebody that was in the shape that I was in 5 years earlier would have had a lot of trouble. So yeah, I think it was, I'm never going back. I think that the way of eating that I am living today is, it's just got to be so much healthier with respect to any sort of cancer risk. I had a bad diet and I was eating a lot of sugar, a lot of processed carbs, a lot of seed oils. It just it wasn't good on any stretch. And I had no idea how much better I could feel. You do something for decades and you accept it. If you don't know that there's something better out there, digestion, how you feel after a meal for the next, you know, 15 minutes, the next hour, the whole rest of the night, how you feel the next day. I mean, I feel tremendous now at age 60 and I'm in the best shape of my life. And it's all a direct result from those, what started as some relatively straightforward dietary changes in 2018.
You said that having cancer changed the way that you looked. I can't, don't remember exactly the words you used, but the gist of it was it changed your entire perspective on life.
Yeah.
You mentioned behaviors. How did it change your views?
I can vividly remember, where I was the day of that treatment. I mean, the day of the diagnosis, each of the steps, and feeling like I didn't know what was going to happen, but this, I was thinking about, there's a good chance I'm going to die. Now I started to realize, you know what, no matter what happens, I'm going to die. How this cancer is dealt with, if it's successful or not, is going to determine when I die. But I started realizing that, the worst thing for me, I spent hours by myself just thinking, after I had plenty of support from my family and friends, but I remember those first couple of days just thinking about life and thinking, the worst thing is not to die, but to die with regret, to be on your deathbed and feel like you blew it, like you didn't do what you were supposed to do, that you wasted this amazing opportunity that you have to be on this planet. And I mean, this other times in my life, I made promises to myself. I can remember I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. But this was like, an awakening. I just realized that we get one chance, and so many people just become complacent because the days just kind of stack one after another, and you just, you go to bed and then you wake up and you trudge through your day, and there's got to be something more to it than that. And if there's not, you're gonna have those regrets on your deathbed. So now I think a lot about, every day, every week, is what I'm doing lining up with the things that are gonna make me feel content when I get to the end, whenever that is.
You've really been inspirational to me because we are roughly the same age. Um, yeah, I don't want to say any more than that. But
We won't give away the secret, Jack. You got a few years on Chris, but
you've got photos of yourself on Twitter. By the way, folks, Chris is a good follow. Biggest Comeback, is that right?
Yep.
Biggest Comeback.
And
Chris Cornell on I'm sorry, X at Biggest Comeback. And he's got photos of himself at, was it maybe late 40s and now? And if you look close, you can kind of tell it's the same person, the same face. But dude, how much muscle have you put on your, do you know what your body fat is? This is so bro Jimmy kind of stuff that I'm doing here, but I've
No.
looked at you and Chris is about the same size and look at those shoulders. And I just want
Um,
to know.
I don't, I've never gotten a DEXA scan. I know that by the NIH BMI body mass index scale that I'm still a bit overweight, but I feel pretty comfortable that my body fat levels are within what any practitioner would deem as a healthy body fat level. I don't know the percentages, so it probably wouldn't be
Yeah,
smart for
yeah.
me to guess. But yeah, I'm in like right up there with I don't know. They're probably, when I was in my 20s, once or twice I got into some pretty good shape, but it all, by the time I was even close to 30 and then all the way up through after going low carb. So we're talking like over, 35 years of not being in great shape. My level of obesity went up and down, and I wasn't always super overweight, although I never had great body composition. But towards, my mid 40s up to 51, things were just progressively getting worse and worse. There was just no end to my ability to put away processed foods.
Oh,
Um,
Yeah, so many of us. I mean, I think, what you've been great at demonstrating is, the misconception that you can't build muscle after 40 or after 50 or whatever, and here you are, now 60 years old, adding muscle actively, getting stronger actively after having recovered from, cancer and chemotherapy, which in and of itself, honestly, I can say it is pretty rare, that people recover muscle to the degree that you have after undergoing cancer treatment. And to be demonstrating that, like you said, someone who was not a bodybuilder, right, not super fit, not super muscular in their 30s and 40s, and here you are now in your 50s and 60s, to demonstrate what can be done, I think is inspiring a lot of people. And just as you said earlier, one of the things that's happened in this journey is the limitations that you were putting on yourself, and so many of us put on ourselves, that you now realize are self-imposed, and they're not real limitations, and if you're willing to put the work in, you can get the results.
Yes, yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you just said. And it's like it comes down to determining whether something is worthwhile and if it is, doing what you have to do to get it. But at the same time, this idea of doing whatever you have to do to get it sounds a little bit like no pain, no gain, punish yourself, run 10 miles a day, you know, restrict calories, all that stuff, because that's what we hear for, endlessly out there in the mainstream nutrition and medical world. But I personally have found some very good ways, some good strategies to make exercise fun. I've done that in a lot of different ways. And exercise for me is in the form of resistance training and running. I've done a lot of distance running, and I've also done some sprinting. And then with the diet, you hear people talking about how this diet, and it's a broad range of diets that I think can be healthy, you know, carnivore, ketogenic, low carb, and there's other diets that you can make work. But this idea that they have to be restrictive and unpleasant and unsustainable, to me, is just it's not a fact. It's not true if you're creative about it. And I honestly enjoy my meals now probably considerably more than I ever did when I was at my worst. I was addicted to crappy foods, but the feeling that I got from eating those crappy foods never measured up to the appeal that they had before I ate them. I think most people can relate to that. Some of the strategies that I've learned from other people. And that's another reason why I was motivated to pursue this whole coaching idea. I went through the uh, Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners. I got the accreditation as a metabolic health practitioner, and then subsequently, you know, it got into the Primal Health Institute basic
The what?
certification. Primal
Primal
Health.
Health Institute? I hadn't heard of that one.
That's Mark Sassan's. He was the founder, and I've through you, Phil, and Krishna Hanks, who's the employee wellness director at Ovadia Heart Health, and is also a lifelong, besides for being a professional dancer, she's been coaching for a long time at a very high level. So I had the opportunity to speak to her, and she specifically recommended the Primal Health Institute for actual hands-on coaching training, which I've found to be extremely good. And it complemented all of the educational materials that I've learned through the Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners and the Nutrition Network. It's like a lot of education, a lot of personal experience, and then learning the techniques on how to, help guide someone else to, control and work out a plan that is sustainable for them.
It sounds like you're pretty agnostic in terms of the various silos that the metabolic health world occasionally tends to fracture into: keto versus just low carb, no sugar, some sugar, all carnivore. Have you had any experience with vegetarians? And I don't
Ah,
mean,
I actually I have. I try to be kind to everyone. I try to get along, and not only do I have some experience dealing with vegetarians and people on plant-based diets, but I sort of dabbled in that myself, not with much success. But, considering where I am today, most people are surprised to hear that I went 10 plus years without having red meat back in my earlier days. And I did that for health reasons. That was the reason why I did it. I thought it was beneficial for my health. I can't recall the exact chronology, but before, several years before I went on a low carb diet, I was treated for a severe uh, B12 deficiency.
is that a side effect of not getting enough meat?
It certainly can be.
The doctor's nodding his head.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know exactly, it seems weird, but when the test came, I was suffering. I was out of shape. I was way overweight, as I mentioned before, but I was getting to the point where I couldn't walk up a half a flight of stairs. I mean, like, I thought there was something made. This was long before the cancer. I thought that I must have something really bad. And I went to the doctor and he checked me out. He got blood tests. And finally, when the stuff came back, he said, yeah, you've got like your B12 levels are so low that they're like, he told me that he couldn't remember seeing someone's levels so low. So anyway, so yes, I don't seem to engage much, although you know what? I should be, if I think about my entire life, I mean, I coexist with people who are on plant-based diets. I don't know if I personally know any complete vegans that I live with or interact with, but definitely vegetarians. And I think that my diet is significantly better for a number of reasons. But if a plant-based diet is working for you, as I know, I've read Phil's book many times. I refer to it all the time, and the articles on the website. There's a lot of ways to be healthy. There's a lot of ways to do it. And if being plant-based is what you want to do, you can make it work. I think it's harder, but yeah, I've definitely seen a lot of people get to a very good point with multiple approaches. So I try not to be in a silo of just only hanging out with people that eat exactly what I eat.
Although it does make shopping easier.
You know what?
I
Honestly,
speak I speak as a man whose wife has chosen to adopt his method of eating. It simplifies our trips to the grocery store.
you are correct about that. The way that I eat, I think it really does simplify life. But I don't have any problem with other foods in my house, foods that I know that I stay away from. They don't work for me. Um, The only problem you mentioned at the beginning of this show, Jack, the Thanksgiving falling off the wagon thing, the thing that I've noticed, which is my biggest downfall, is not having foods around me. It's when I have to sit in front of a table that is filled with those foods for 2, 3, 4 hours at a time, because my discipline erodes if I am in that situation. You start getting into conversations and you find your hand just reaching for the bowl. That doesn't happen in my house. I don't open the cabinet that has the foods that are not good for me.
Makes sense.
Keeping
Legitimate.
them, segregated, or as it is, probably a good strategy. Let's talk about a little bit about, the coaching. What motivated you to pursue that, to want to, it's one thing to make the changes in your life. And, many people do that without then trying to help others. So what was your motivation for going into coaching and for, wanting to help others do this as well?
I think some of the people listening to this might realize that I have done a lot of writing and interviewing people over the years for different organizations. I have my career has involved a bunch of different things, but writing has been something that I've done a lot of. And once I got involved in low carb, I a lot of my writing was the result of interviewing doctors and other practitioners, as well as individuals who have had personal successful experiences in most cases, with sustainably losing weight and improving their metabolic health, coming off type 2 diabetes medicines, managing type 1 diabetes, going through cancer, all of these things. And it got me thinking, because I'm talking to all of these people who have had life-changing transformations. And then when I talked to the doctors and the nurses and the dietitians, I started making a point, and this is several years ago, I try to make a point of asking each person that I talk to at some point in the interview, if I get the chance, what is it, in your opinion, that causes some people to succeed and others to fail? And I became intrigued with that question. And I also became intrigued with the fact that some practitioners didn't seem to really have an answer, or, I was perplexed. Some of them actually, it seemed like it was the first time they were asked that question, which kind of shocked me. Others gave me great answers. And I was like, why are we at a point in this country where we've got a growing number of people that are metabolically sick and obese? And why can't we figure out how to help these people find a path, realistic and sustainable? How can we give these people hope? And that, by the way, is there are obesity medicine doctors out there, several of whom have blocked me on X because I dared to, pick on them for saying that essentially, I virtual quotes like obesity is chronic and not reversible, and lifestyle changes are not sustainable. That's like their basic default. And so that sets them up nicely to get out the prescription pad and just prescribe a medicine for every ill. Now, I'm not a conspiracy theorist when it comes to this stuff. I think there's reasons why this happens, and a lot of it is money and the system, but you don't need a conspiracy to figure out, the food companies are making money selling crap foods, and the doctors that are prescribing medicines, it's easier to get out your prescription pad than it is to help somebody, figure out a lifestyle thing. And I understand that with the way the system is set up, doctors don't have the time to, like in the mainstream system, if they get 8 minutes, how are you going to help someone develop a lasting plan? It's everything is screwed up. All of those things, Jack, that I just, and Phil, that you just asked, I want to be involved in helping individuals find solutions to these challenges. I think, and along the way, long before the idea of being a real health coach presented itself, I would get, I have 50,000 followers on X, and I get direct messages from people that ask me questions that I can't really answer because I'm not equipped. And some questions I can answer, or I can share links to like books or articles by Dr. Ovadia or by, other practitioners. I have a good memory for specific articles that, might be helpful to a certain person in a certain situation. So that's helpful. But a couple of years ago, I did get a couple of people that reached out to me and asked me to coach them. And I didn't really know, I didn't have a plan or anything. And it wasn't setting up a business to be a health coach, but I figured it would be a good practice. So I set up a thing where I coached two different individuals, for one of them for 6 months and the other one for 12 months. And it was a very intriguing learning experience. And I had some success, and I got to experience some not non-success, and it made me want to, push further. And, one of the guys lost over 60 pounds, and he's still at it today, more than a full year later. He rode his bicycle across the state of Michigan. He's inspired other people in the church that he leads to follow his lead. And that was a result of, he deserves almost all of the credit, but I was involved, and it was really an inspiring thing to be a part of. And the other guy that a very nice guy who I gave some accountability coaching to for 6 months, it was a struggle. And I think his success was far less substantial, and definitely made me want to learn more on how to help. It's something that I enjoy and find rewarding.
What was it that clicked in your head when you stood on that scale and saw that number? Why did it change? You knew you were not in shape long before that. You knew you weren't. I'm kind of reading into the situation, of course. Nobody wakes up one day and suddenly discovers, oh my God, I'm terribly unhealthy and 80 pounds overweight. What was there's some element of, I don't know, denial, like I guess it is, that's going on, or lack of seriousness. What happened? Why did that change? Do you know?
I think that in order to get to the answer of that, you have to, I think I probably talked about this a couple years ago on our interview. I had used calorie restriction, white knuckle, willpower to successfully lose, well, I shouldn't use the word successfully, to lose 55 pounds of weight before I ever got to that 278 thing. In fact, it probably wasn't more than a couple of years, maybe 2 years before I got to 278. I had gotten down to 205. And I knew I was capable of losing weight, but I couldn't figure out how to sustain it. And that's extremely frustrating, especially when I lost the 55 pounds. I did it using the exact method that mainstream medicine repeats over and over: restrict calories and move more. And I did it. So it worked, right? Except when you can't sustain it, does it really work? It doesn't work. But you think that their protocol worked and I failed to sustain it. So I'm the failure and they're right. So the progression was, after I was 278, I dabbled with a few things. I cut out sugary beverages. I lost 20 pounds. I lost a little bit more. And then it was in the leading up to 2018, so the fall of 2017, and you mentioned the vegetarian plant-based thing, I was following a diet written by Dr. Joel Fuhrman, who is pretty well known for his, I think, in the book that I had by him, there was chicken was involved, but he's primarily known for being plant-based. And I got myself on the path to losing weight again. And when I reached out to that doctor for help, it was because right as we got up to New Year's, I could feel myself starting to crumble again. By the way, when I did these calorie restriction, white knuckle weight loss plans, I would feel like crap. I was losing muscle mass. I was feeling weak and fatigued. So I was getting to that stage again. I was happy I was losing weight. I wasn't as fat as I was. When I was like this, I just was like, what is going to happen here? I'm going to go right back to where I was. I'm about to just crash and burn. And that's when I reached out to this doctor and I said, here's my situation. Is there any book that you would recommend? And he got back to me relatively quickly with a couple of options, and the top option was why we get fat, and it just changed. So your question, Jack, about messing around or not taking it seriously, or however you put it, I think for a lot of people, that's the way people look at it. But if you're not eating a diet that satisfies your hunger and your cravings, a diet that doesn't provide satiety, at least if you're like me and so many other people, it has no chance of working. And I hear Dr. Ovadia talking about it all the time in his articles. When I hear him speak, you're eating the foods that satisfy what your body needs, and that's protein and nutrients and energy. You need energy to move, to run, to lift. You need protein to build muscle, and then you need all the nutrients. If you're eating the right things, and your body is, there's some people that have gotten themselves so unhealthy that it's more difficult. I was fortunate that basically by eating the right foods, it was easier than I imagined. And I'm cognizant that everybody has a different experience and that you can't just figure out a one size fits all plan for everybody, but there's some commonalities for sure. And then you customize as needed.
So,
That's good to hear.
yeah, and kind of circling back, I'm going to turn it on you. The question that you said you ask so many people when you're doing interviews, why do you think some people succeed and others don't? And specifically, I'm wondering your thoughts on how much is determined by sort of the intrinsic factors to that person, and how much is that too many people get lousy advice, I guess I'll say, around, how to get healthy.
From watching what goes on social media and the silos and the tribalism, I try to avoid overgeneralizing, because whatever you say isn't true in all cases, in most of the time. I think it's a combination. Your point about the information, if it's faulty information, you know, if you're eating the wrong, if I'm eating the wrong foods, if I eat foods like a bag of chips, that destroys me. That ruins my day. It gets me so off track. I start craving foods that I wasn't craving for the last month. If I sit down in front of the food that kills me, my brother-in-law has maple trees on his property. He taps them and he makes real maple syrup he has a shed that he built with a stove that he boils sap right on his property. We go there, and sometimes in the winter we watch the sap boil and we see the whole process. And then he's got gallons of real maple syrup, which is delicious. And by the way, it's far better than the crap that you buy in the supermarket, if for people that still buy sugary syrups. But he makes maple peanuts and he puts them out at the table Thanksgiving.
Right, we're trying to help people go forward here, and you're
This is a warning. I say be very careful and make sure that
my
you
Lord.
eat the protein and the healthy fats before you take a very small handful of my brother-in-law's maple peanuts. But if you eat foods, yeah, again, there are people, like I see people out there, these guys who are jacked and in their 20s, and they talk about how they eat 500 grams of carbs a day. Perhaps that's the case. I don't know. Maybe they'll get away with it forever. Who knows? But not the case for me. The foods that I was eating, left me in a really bad spot. And when I was influenced by all of the propaganda against fat. A lot of my low calorie diets, if I had really gone and studied the guidelines, what I was eating probably didn't match up with the guidelines, perhaps, but they were sometimes almost no fat, and it was just done by restricting calories. And I was always hungry. It's a miserable way to be. So what makes someone succeed? I think one of the critical elements of success is believing that you have a chance. If you think you don't have a chance, and this is true of almost everything in life. I mean, if you're a sports team, I used to try to play sports, and I play mostly casually. But if the sports team that you're rooting for, when they get to the point where they don't believe they have a chance, they're done. Like, you can be way more, you can put it on the line when you think there's a way that it could happen, even if it's a long shot, even if it's 1 in 10. If there's a path to victory, you go out and you try to figure it out. If you think there's a chance that there's no way you can win, why bother? What's the point? And when people have failed, yeah, I mean, some people have done this 30 times. You know what? I don't know. How many times, Dr. Ovedi, did you try to lose weight? I mean, sometimes an attempt lasts 2 days, and then you start over again, and it could be hundreds of times.
Yeah, no, definitely true. I mean, and I think about some of the parallels in our stories. And, again, all the times that I tried, maybe had success short term, but, wasn't sustainable, like you said, and would gain back the weight. And, I think I admittedly had reached a point where I kind of had lost hope. I had kind of given up and just said, okay, my genetics are horrible, and it is what it is, right? And thankfully, I hadn't really given up, and I was willing to give it another try when I came across a sort of new approach and new information. And that's what worked. And, I think that's an unfortunate part of our society, right? Most people that we deal with, right? And maybe there's a little bit of selection bias here, but the people that we come into contact with, they want to be healthy. It's just the advice that they've gotten to that point in their life largely is lousy advice. And when we give them, what works, and again, not universally, but, what seems to work for most people, they're able to do it and they're motivated to do it. And, it is important, right? I was in a conversation earlier, or, this was actually our team meeting, right? So Chris and the other coaches, and we were all talking about this. And, we talked about how we oftentimes have patients, clients of ours that have success. And they're like, I want my relative to do this, right? I want my friend to do this, right? And some of them will go as far as, we're going to pay for it, right? For this other person to do it. And over, right, we see that approach fail because the other person isn't engaged. They're not motivated. And you can have the best advice in the world, but if they're not willing to put in the effort and they don't have the why, right? This is what it always comes back to for me. That person in front of you has to know why they want to do this. Getting healthy isn't it perhaps isn't an intrinsic thing, right? You have to know why you want to get healthy. Getting healthy for the sake of getting healthy oftentimes doesn't quite do it, right? You have to have a deeper why. And that's one of the things that I've certainly learned along the way.
Gotta have a real why.
Absolutely. Yeah. Understanding why you're doing it, because all of these choices that we make are, they should be intentional. And, if you don't know why, then there's nothing supporting those choices, which, at times can be difficult to make. They really shouldn't be as difficult as we make them out to be. But, if there's no reason to avoid certain foods, if you can't really articulate why you're avoiding it, then it's, when you get in a pinch, that food is going to find its way back and cause the same problems it did the first time. I just a little point about the coaching that I've been heavily immersed in for the last several months. I find that I'm really inspired to work with patients. I've learned so much for myself that I've been able to apply some of these same principles 5+ years into very successful journey. As I mentioned before, I'm now 60 years old, and I've gained strength over the last 6 months, which is something that I've been working on. But there's no reason that, when I was 55, the thought of me gaining strength at age 60 was preposterous. I mean, how would that happen? And so I've learned little things from this coaching process that I've merely applied to myself. It involves, asking questions and then like you said, Jack, and Phil, with the why, trying to figure out why you're doing things and developing systems and accountabilities that help you get to where you need to go.
I mean, I can certainly say that, you are inspiring others and, your story is inspirational. And, kind of as we wrap up, I'm going to say that I am honored that you have chosen to work, with my team. And, we really are looking forward to having you as a coach in this team, in this organization. We've very much have taken a team-based approach to this problem, and it's great to have you involved, and we're really looking forward to having you as a coach now for us, in addition to some of the other work that you've been doing with us for a while now. I encourage people to, like Jack said, Chris is a great follow on X. Go check him out. You'll be inspired as well. And if you're looking for help, if you need help, I'm proud to say I have a great team that I've brought together now to help people implement these things and get you on track and keep you on track. We'd be honored if you come check us out.
And I'd like to point out that Chris started this journey in his 50s. This was not, I'm 28 and I have 12 pounds of fat that I need to. This was a guy who, it can be done, and he's done it well.
Before we go, I just want to say thank you both for having me here for this interview. And Dr. Ovadia, I met you coming down the elevator at the Symposium for Metabolic Health in Boca in 2020. It was a very fortunate meeting that I benefited from. I subsequently got to see and read your book, and I've gotten to hear you present now at subsequent symposiums, and I'm looking forward to your presentation at the upcoming symposium in Boca, January 23rd to 26th. And I really, you mentioned building a great team at Ovadia Heart Health. I can say over the last several months, being a part of the inner part of the team, you really hired some great people. I've learned so much from the other health coaches and the nurse practitioner. It's just a wonderful, knowledgeable, caring team that I'm really proud to be joining as a health coach, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah,
well, I think that's a good wrap up.
Yep, it will be the 5-year anniversary of our elevator meeting at that meeting, and we're looking forward to the upcoming. As you said, this episode's going to release a couple of weeks in advance of that. But for anyone who is interested in that, the Symposium for Metabolic Health 2025, Boca, Florida, and we'd love to see people there.
Oh, don't forget, I know you have a 20% iFix Hearts discount, and why not give your listeners a nice little bonus?
Yeah, we'll make sure that gets in the show notes as well.
Show notes, 20% discount. Okay. The producer better make a note of that. All right. Follow Chris Cornell on X at Biggest Comeback. Good guy to follow, inspiring to see his growth over the years as I followed him, especially for those of us on the north side of 50. It's pretty cool. All right. For Dr. Philip Ovadia, this has been Stay Off My Operating Table. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Chances are you wouldn't be listening to this podcast if you didn't need to change your life and get healthier. So take action right now. Book a call with Dr. Ovadia's team. One small step in the right direction is all it takes to get started. Contact us at ifixhearts.com/talk. That's ifixhearts.com/talk.